All right. And all right. I got them to start at the same time this time. I want to welcome everybody to 40 Days to Call His People. And this is day 9. This is uh, an investigation, search, whatever you want to call it, seeking for answers and looking at America's patriot community and looking at the nation as a whole and seeing what is going on or maybe what isn't going on with our patriots. And then when we look at everything as a whole, do we, investigate being in the end times? And, is that something that we can entertain as possibly being the truth? So that's what I've been getting into, and I will get to the end time stuff. I think a lot of people are into that. A lot of people keep a lot of interest in wondering if it is the end times or not. And I don't, I don't know where we're at yet, but I will be investigating that. So I see people hopping on. Hey, Casey, how are you? I'm also on my YouTube if that's easier for folks. And if you're on YouTube and it's easier to Facebook, you can go to YouTube, type in Jeremy Dieter, or you can go to Facebook and type in Jeremy Dieter. And that might make it a little bit easier for some people. Facebook gets wanky, so you can go to the YouTube channel and maybe that'll be easier. So with the title, I have Christian warriors must not be timid, and they must defend what God gave them. That's pretty strong language. The thing is we don't hear about it. We don't hear that type of language from churches that we go to here in America, or maybe anywhere. It's not language that we're used to, and the fighting forces that gave us the United States first went to church, and if their pastor, whose job it is to be a shepherd and lead his congregation, he's supposed to know about their lives. He's supposed to give them guidance. And so they look to him for that direction. And that's what happened. When they founded the nation, there, are numerous accounts of it was the church pastors who were approached by other militia leadership and, hey, how many, guys, how many men do you have willing to fight? How many men do you have willing to fight? And that was in large part how we got the nation. It was how we ended up getting, a militia per each state. I'm going on a bit late tonight. I apologize. I forgot to invite people again. So I'm doing that now. So it was church leadership. If you think about that, think about the churches that you've seen today on television. Think about the church pastors that you've seen. Can you imagine them calling men to arms? Because the First Nations pastors did. So that makes it to where immediately we have to investigate the character and nature of God, and does it change, or does it waver? Does it have a circumstantial or environmental or historical preface that it has to hit, and then it alters? And the answer is that God's nature and God's character always remains the same, always. And the promises, the covenant between people and God ended up evolving. It ended up where God wasn't living, didn't have a spirit sent down to his people to live inside of them. So they were completely godless on the inside. They didn't have a spirit to help them discern. anything. So they were just running around, as the flesh, or in the sinful flesh, as some people would say. And to me, when I think about that, that's really scary. So in Samuel, in First Samuel, I won't be reading a whole lot to you. Chapter 15, it says, Samuel said to Saul, I am the one the Lord sent to anoint you king over his people, Israel. So listen now to the message from the Lord. This is what the Lord Almighty says. I will punish the Amalekites for what they did to Israel when they waylaid them as they came up from Egypt. Now go attack the Amalekites and totally destroy everything that belongs to them. Do not spare them. Put to death men, women, children, and infants, cattle and sheep, camels and donkeys. So in this instance, and others, this is the complete and total annihilation. And they ended up not following God's orders. And God takes everything away from Saul, the king of Israel. He takes it all away. It's the warning that says if you're fighting, if you're standing, if you're protesting, like the early Protestants, they had to protest the faith because they weren't allowed to freely, say it or share it. And so they were a rebellious group, that they had a no compromise. The Christians were the hardest ones to deal with, to imprison, to enslave. They were the hardest ones. You put them in prison and they would sing songs. You put them in prison and they would minister to other prisoners and the guards, everybody. And you couldn't get them to stop. And you couldn't get them to shut up. They wouldn't stop. So instead of them being, mournful, they were being locked up because they were Christians and they were happy about it. They were being persecuted in the name of God. So they were very happy about it. And do we see Christians like that today? We've already looked at the pastors. Can you see the pastors that you've seen on TV, or the ones that you've seen in person, or ones that can you see them calling for this nation's men to stand and to do so by what's right for God, what's right for Christian families, what's right for Christian patriots? And now look at the Christians. Is this something that you can see the Christians doing? Is it something that, if you were called to defend, if as Christians we can agree that this was either a Christian or Christianized nation, or both, and that was the premise by which it was founded. If that's the case, then if you start to lose that fabric, the Christian fabric of the nation, if you start to lose that, then you have to fight for it. Naturally, you're going to have to stand and speak. You're going to have to possibly protest. There are many different ways in which you're going to have to fight for it. And people in these lands were once called to do that very thing. And they're known as patriots commonly, but they're also known as Christian warriors. There isn't much more that gives us a correlation between the founders of this nation and who we are and what we are today, because they were also a gaggle of misfits. They were also a motley crew. And But even those folks, they all worshiped the same God, and they had that. We have that in common. The rest of our circumstance is almost entirely different. The British had a home and a place to run to, a place to leave here to go to, that they could go home and relax and they wouldn't have to fight. We don't have that anymore. Who we're fighting is here at home. It's us. It's our people. Um, we don't have the same, technological circumstance in any way. We're looking at a time where John Hancock's boats were just on the other side of the horizon, waiting for a signal to come in. And they had, diverter ships that were coming in that were occupying the British fleet. And then, his actual ships that had alcohol and everything were making it around, and they were able to smuggle the alcohol and everything off of there and, do more trips that way. They had a network, a criminal conspiratorial syndicate put together, that today equivalent, then they would kill you. Today it's, I don't know, probably 100 years in a federal prison, if you had like your own ships and you were doing stuff like that, but they 11 of the founders, they lost their homes. And when I mean they lost their homes, because they all lost their homes uh, by fire. They burned them to the ground, and they had families inside. Some of them were inside, not all of them. I think there were 3 or 4 that they weren't actually in the house while their families burned, but the rest of them burned with their families in the house. They literally gave up everything. We hear about John Adams and Sam Adams and Dr. Warren and John Hancock. These are the ones that that we talk about, but it's not all of them. They gave up everything. They gave up everything. And they were willing to do that because they were just like the Protestants in the Roman Colosseums that held their hands like this and smiled while lions tore flesh from their bodies, saying, "Thank you, Lord. I get to go to you." So who are we today? What are we today? We're not the zealots of the Roman past. We're not the Knights Templar on the trade, protecting the trade routes from Muslim Barbary hordes. We're not the colonial patriots with the pastors that called us to fight with guns on behalf of God, country, and family. But who are we? Because we're something. What are we? Where are we in the scheme of Christians historically and the Protestants? We could also look at the over 100 million Christians, solely Christians, that were killed by the Turks. A genocide that's still denied today. 100 million. In the horrible Holocaust, it was only 6 million Jews. Not, 6 million is a lot of freaking people, don't get me wrong. But compared to 100 million Christians, and then what about the Christians in Nicaragua? What about the Christians that are killed by Boko Haram? Do we think that it will not happen to us? Is that what we think? That not only, as the governor of Kentucky said, who are we to think that we'll be the first generation of Americans to not have to sacrifice for the freedoms and the privileges that we do have, the rights that we still have? And who's to say that if we are a generation that has to sacrifice, that we won't be a generation that has to sacrifice greatly? Why would we believe that? Why would we think that? And it should be an honor for us to do so. Because as the Christians are concerned, we defend what God gave us. We do it in every and any way that we can today. We all the way from events and posters and billboards to protests and rallies and patriot summits, and we have every reason, every reason to change our tone, to at least find out who we are, find out what we are, because God's nature and character doesn't change. If he gave us land, and there comes time for us to defend it, then by our God, we should defend it. The Christians, and I said this in another video, in this nation, need to stop looking at this nation as a Christian nation. By the largest numbers you can find, we're maybe 50%, maybe somewhere around 50%, maybe. But on that alone, we obviously cannot call ourselves a Christian nation. We need to change our tone and look at this as pagan lands where we're doing God's work. Whether it's just by the way that we live, but whether it's just by the way that we treat the people around us. We have to be gracious, we have to be kind, and we have to be loving. And if that sounds counter to where I said we'll have to fight and defend, then let me explain thoroughly. It makes no sense for us to watch a culture leaving us, to watch Christianity go from being the centerpiece of the nation, its moral compass, to looking from the inside and guiding everything, to now being on the outside and looking in, and us stand idly by. That makes no sense. Do not be timid. In whatever way it is that God calls you to stand for these lands and stand for your people, do so. Do not be timid. Because if time calls on us to have to defend God's lands that he gave to us, we have to defend these lands. Even if we're grossly outnumbered, even if our own wants to stand against us, we stand with our God. And if we find ourselves in some colonial-esque position, if we go to the worst case scenario, and it's like some setting from a futuristic movie, where it's like almost post-apocalyptic. And you have to, picture some kind of like insurrection force, underground Bible studies and all of this. We don't fight for vengeance. We're always fighting to preserve the things that we love. We're fighting for reason. We're fighting for sanity. That's part of this fight. Communication. And when we talk to each other. I haven't figured it all out, and I'm not going to pretend to. But I can't help but feel like when I read the stories that God says, do as I say. When people have done that, whether it was war, whether it was whatever, the people prospered. When they didn't follow his words, they suffered greatly. And God does call on you to defend. He's called on simple farmers and shepherds to be his warriors. And when they knew who they were fighting for, they won both in death and in life. I don't know if that's who we are. I think that's who I want to be, and I don't know if any of this helped any of you. But I'm definitely speaking about myself. I'm definitely speaking about me, and it's kind of an open dialogue. I'm giving you my open monologue in my head. I'm telling you guys my thoughts because I know that this relates to me. And I'm trying to figure it out, and I hope that you guys have been sending tremendous feedback. I really love it. I really appreciate it. I'm not able to keep up on all of my social media, obviously, and I apologize for that. But the feedback I've been able to catch has been tremendous, and I really appreciate it. Um, thank you, Lord, for speaking through me and helping me out, and I think helping other folks out too, and showing us your love. And um, this is day 9. Tomorrow's day 10, which means we'll be a quarter of the way through. 40 days to call His people, and it really seems like 40 days to tell people my internal dialogue and the questions I have concerning our God. Um, but here we are, 40 days to call His people, and we're rolling with it. So hopefully, you guys, like I said, have gotten something from this. And thank you, Audrey. She said, learning and growing in the right direction. Um, Carolyn Hudson said, he said, sell your coat and buy a sword. He says, I know exactly what you're talking about, Miss Hudson. It's when he says, while I've been with you, have you needed anything? And he says, no. You'll find this in Luke. He says, no. He says, well, I'm not going to be with you. So if you have to, sell your cloak to buy a sword. Now, we have to give this the historical context that it deserves, because to sell your cloak, that's what protects your body. That's what protects your skin. I mean, from the elements, from the hot desert sun and the cold desert nights, man. I mean, it's a life preserver, man. Your cloak is everything, you know. And he said to get rid of that, to get the one thing that you can use to defend your life. Right? We're never to strike out in vengeance, never to strike. Even as an insurgent force, you don't strike. If you're Christian soldiers, you never strike out in vengeance. It's to defend. It's to preserve. It's to defend God. It's God's ways, God's lands, God's people. And in Luke, he's telling you the importance of his followers arming themselves with whatever it is that you can use to adequately defend yourself. Obviously, in this day and age, that's a gun. If you're a woman and some big huge dude is trying to mug you, murder you, worse, I don't know, whatever, harm you, a gun is the equalizer, period. If you're a Christian, you should have a firearm, end of story. God says it. Sell your cloak to get a sword. He comes back, and his answer is he has two. He has one in each hand. And Jesus's answer was, that's enough. That's enough. Like, well, that's enough. Like, that'll do. But you can have a lot. Yeah, I mean, defend yourself the way you can adequately defend yourself. If you think politicians believe themselves to be so special, and now they're so special, they're going to take away all kind of your rights. The real ID happening next year, which is complete and utter garbage, and I could just do a whole thing on that, like right off the top of my head. I know a lot about it, and it's stupid. It's dumb. It's a really bad idea. It's typical government. To taking away gun rights and religious freedoms and due process and all of the things that we're seeing happen. These people are doing that because they either A, believe that you will not strike with the guns that you have, or B, have taken your guns. Those are the only two logical answers to violating and raping the Constitution the way that they have, and henceforth natural rights. I know that it's brash language, but I know I'm not the only one thinking and feeling these things and believing these things, that as Christians, we have certain responsibilities, and the sword is your tongue. It's your words, it's incredible offense. It's incredible defense. It's an incredible neutralizer. It creates kinship, just as much as it can cultivate all kinds of problems in your life. It's a sword, you know. It's a way to assault somebody. That's why I think we have verbal assault, you know. Anyway, I won't keep you guys forever, man. I appreciate you being here. I think I don't believe I'm alone in these thoughts, and you know, if you feel like I'm crossing some kind of a line, let me know. You know, I believe that I'm able to speak on these things at least decently, or I wouldn't speak on them. You know, I just wouldn't do it. I take very serious the ability, you know, and having the knowledge to be able to at least have a decent conversation on these things. I will not profess to be any better than that because I'm not, but it's a decent conversation. There's at least enough scripture there, you know, that you can, like the one in First Samuel that I read, chapter 15. You can actually correlate that in different places in the Bible where it's showing you. You know, he when it came to the sons and daughters of Ishmael, he had called the Christians to take them out in the exact same way, except the words he used was "let nothing breatheth." You know, do not plunder, let nothing breatheth. I mean, it was total annihilation once again, and they plundered once again. And he said, "And if you do, there will be a thorn in your side forever." And they had their chance, and they didn't do it. They plundered, so they didn't listen to God's word, and men has been in conflict ever since. So um, anyway, I thank you for the participation and the encouragement, and I appreciate you guys. And again, if you're having these thoughts too, you know, and it's not just me, you know, then there we go, right? Like we know that, you know, we're probably where we should be in trying to figure these things out, you know, and this is where I'm coming from with it. And I anyway, day 9, and enjoy the rest of your night. Enjoy your families. Be around the people you love, and you know, talk to God tonight, man. Before you lay down, you know, have a conversation with Him. Look, tell Him I don't even know what to say. Lord, I do not know what to say. I don't know where I am. I kind of have a feeling about it. I feel maybe guilty about because I don't do what I'm supposed to, and you know, help me out, man. Give me little steps, baby steps, you know, something. Just put something in my direction and let me know that it's you. You know, I don't want to struggle with knowing if it's you too much, and you know, let me know, and um, you know, be a little bit more evident in my life, you know, so I can you know, feel that, you know, and have a little bit more, you know, confidence in the God that I profess, and you know, just be real, just be honest, and God will love you for it. He'll love your face off, give you a whole new face. You wake up and be somebody else. No, I can't back that up, but you know what I'm saying. He'll love you for it. I hope again, I hope this has helped, and I hope you guys have a good night, man. Be back tomorrow with day 10.